Hello everyone, my name is Jason Brumitt, and I'm sorry that I can't be there with you in person, but I am excited to share our research. Previous research has reported strength gains in muscles proximal to tourniquet application. The ability to augment strength in the rotator cuff may benefit patients who receive physical therapy services for shoulder injuries. The purpose of this study was to determine the effectiveness of a BFR program applied to the lower extremity followed by rotator cuff training at augmenting strength. To our knowledge, 3 studies have been published in the literature that have evaluated the effectiveness of a BFR training program on augmenting rotator cuff strength. Bowman et al. Randomized subjects into a BFR group and to a non-BFR training group. Those in the BFR group had the tourniquet applied to the upper arm and pressure was set at 60% of one's limb occlusion pressure. All participants performed exercises bilaterally. There were 5 exercises as illustrated here on this slide. The training load was set at 30% of 1 RM initially, and weight was increased when one's RPE during exercise dropped below a 7. Exercises were performed twice a week for 6 weeks, and each exercise was performed for 4 sets. Bowman et al. Reported that those in the BFR group experienced significantly greater strength increases compared to the control group for shoulder scaption, flexion, and abduction, as well as elbow flexion and grip strength. However, there was no difference in strength for shoulder ER, IR, or elbow extension. They did do an analysis comparing the BFR limb with the non-BFR limb for those in the experimental group. They reported similar findings, and in addition, they reported those in the BFR limb experienced significantly greater changes in shoulder ER mean power. We conducted a randomized controlled trial. For those in the BFR group, the BFR cuff was applied to the dominant upper extremity and pressure was set to 50% of their limb occlusion pressure. Only one exercise was performed, the sideline shoulder ER exercise. The training load was set at 30% of 1 RM throughout the study. Subjects trained twice a week for 8 weeks, and the exercise was performed for 4 sets. All subjects experienced significant increases in strength. There were no difference, though, in strength between groups. There was also no difference in strength based on training experience. Lambert et al. Conducted an RCT. Those in the BFR group had the cuff applied to their upper extremity, and they had the pressure set at 50% of their limb occlusion pressure. 4 exercises were performed. Each exercise was performed for 4 sets, with the final set performed to fatigue. Training load initially set at 20% and was increased by 1 pound when a training goal was achieved. They reported significant increases in isometric shoulder IR strength and lean mass of the arm and shoulder in those in the BFR group. However, there was no difference in strength for external rotation or for scaption. So far, prior studies have applied BFR to the upper extremity, performing 1 to 5 exercises for 12 to 16 sessions. There have been inconsistent findings related to increases in scaption strength and no increases between groups for isometric shoulder ER strength. This study by Madarame et al. Has influenced our most recent study. In Madarame et al., they had 2 groups. They performed exercises twice a week for 10 weeks. Both groups performed bicep curls at 50% of 1 RM, and their bicep curls were performed without occlusion. What was occluded was the thighs bilaterally in one group, the occlusion group, versus the non-occlusion or the non-BFR group. So both groups performed leg extension and leg curls for 3 sets at 30% of 1 RM, but the BFR group had occlusion bilaterally set at 160 millimeters of mercury, and this was increased by 20 millimeters of mercury every 2 weeks. What they found after 10 weeks is that there was a significant increase in bicep cross-sectional area and torque in the occlusion group. Madarame et al. Reported in 2010 that a lower extremity occlusion program, so occluding the lower extremities, doing leg extension and leg curls, led to a significantly greater growth hormone response than occluding the upper extremity performing 2 exercises. So this gives some credence to potentially getting a greater systemic effect by occluding the lower extremities. So for our current study, it was a randomized controlled trial. We recruited 35 participants, 29 were females, and these individuals were not currently participating in a weight training program. The mean age was 25.8. These were undergrad and graduate school students who were free from current musculoskeletal pathology or having had a musculoskeletal surgery during the prior year. Pre- and post-tests were conducted by 2 co-investigators who were blinded to group assignment. Dynamometry was performed by 1 co-investigator, and he demonstrated excellent test-retest reliability. Ultrasound imaging of the rectus femoris was performed by a different co-investigator who also demonstrated great reliability. Subjects were randomized to a BFR or non-BFR group. BFR was applied to the proximal portion of the dominant lower extremity, and pressure was set to 80% of limb occlusion pressure. All subjects performed first the knee extension and knee curl exercises. They performed 4 sets of each at 30% of 1 RM, and then they performed 3 sets of 15 for the scaption and sideline external rotation exercise, again at 30% of 1 RM. All subjects experienced within group increases in strength for the supraspinatus, shoulder external rotators, quads, and hamstrings, but there were no between group differences for strength. Also, no change in rectus femoris cross-sectional area within or between groups. So this study explored an alternative method applying BFR to the lower extremity, followed by rotator cuff exercises. This is the 4th study, to our knowledge, to demonstrate no change in ER strength between a BFR and non-BFR group. We also found no between group difference for scaption strength. And interestingly, there was no difference in lower extremity strength or size. So why no changes in lower extremity strength and size? Because prior research has shown that even just one exercise performed by subjects in a BFR group was superior to those performed by the non-BFR group. However, prior studies may have had more total training sessions or trained for a longer duration. And so for us potentially to get an effect, if we're only going to be doing things for an 8-week period, we may need to have people perform more than 2 exercises. Now, why didn't the BFR lower extremity program augment rotator cuff strength? Well, Matarame and May et al., when they did their studies, they applied occlusion bilaterally, and the occlusion levels were increased above the traditional 80%. So if future studies can show bilateral lower extremity occlusion being beneficial at augmenting rotator cuff strength, this is potentially clinically relevant because clinics may need to purchase additional units. So future direction, I'm recommending that people do BFR studies, occluding both lower extremities bilaterally, either by doing lower extremity exercises like in Matarame et al., or like we're getting ready to start a cycling program where people are going to cycle with both legs occluded for 10 minutes, and then we're going to have them do rotator cuff exercises. Future studies should consider having people perform more rotator cuff exercises. It may be that performing an increased number may lead to improved outcomes. And you may need to increase the load. Some studies only have the load maintained at a certain percentage, but typically we don't do that in clinical practice. We increase the load over time. So that may be also another consideration for future research. Well, again, I want to thank the American Academy of Sports Physical Therapy for giving us the opportunity to share this research. I'm sorry that we weren't there to be able to answer any questions, but if you'd like to see the research, it's been published in Physical Therapy and Sport, or if you have any questions for me, please reach out to me via email or by Twitter. Thank you very much.